So whether you're facing a major health issue or an atypical financial pressure, or maybe just regular financial pressures, or a personal situation has gone awry, or maybe the world events aren't going how you wanted them to, how do you feel better in a situation where you can't change things, many things? How do you find ease when you're feeling unease? How do you navigate a crisis? And how do you kind of get your mind to work with you instead of against you? And how do you do it in a way that doesn't feel like a whole other list of things you have to do? How do you, like, what are some tips? What are some things we can do that make us sort of feel better and almost instantly in a more like a sort of a new direction? And it's not like another thing we have to add to our list of already, the list of things that we're facing. My name is Lisa Azile. I'm the author of Whose Mind Is It Anyway? And to help me with this, I have got Dr. Amy Johnson with me. Amy is amazing. She's an author of 3 books: Being Human, The Little Book of Big Change, The No Willpower Approach to Breaking Any Habit, and her last book, Just a Thought, A No Willpower Approach to Overcome Self-Doubt and Make Peace with Your Mind. Amy has a top-rating podcast called Changeable, and she's been featured as an expert in all sorts of areas, from the Steve Harvey Show to Oprah.com and the Wall Street Journal. And thank you, Amy, for taking time out to come and chat to us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
Yep, great. So I thought I've written down a few points that I thought might be useful, and I know you've maybe done the same. Like how, and I listened to your podcast a couple of weeks ago on overwhelm. I don't know if that's one of your points, but I wanted to talk to you about that. But where would you start? Where would you start? So if someone's feeling kind of overwhelmed and in a different place, life isn't the normal sort of, or maybe it is normal. Maybe you're experiencing uncertainty and you have been for a while. What would you say to someone right off the bat? What would your first port of call be?
Yeah, well, I think this is really big. This is really profound, and sometimes it's easy to kind of gloss over. But consider that uncertainty is like it's fine. It's the nature of things. Everything is always uncertain. And in fact, I would say uncertainty is not what we suffer over. Everyone thinks like, oh, I just don't like uncertainty. It's not that we don't like uncertainty. It's that we don't like certainty when the certainty is a story about how everything's wrong and we don't know what's going to happen. So, in other words, say there's some major, say you just got a diagnosis, or like some of the things you mentioned, right? Or there's a major change happening in your country, or we're on the brink of something, right? People are going to be running around saying, oh my God, there's so much uncertainty and it's so uncomfortable, and how do I deal with it? It's not the uncertainty that's bothering them. It's that their mind is making up stories about what's likely to happen, and those don't look like stories. Those look real, even when they're contradicting. Even when the mind is like, just to use this example, like, well, everything, maybe it's not going to be as bad as I think it is. Maybe everything will be okay. Oh my gosh, no way. It's definitely going to be horrible. Like, even when that's happening, we can look at that and logically say, okay, clearly the mind it's contradicting itself. Like thoughts don't know the future. Like there's so much in that statement. Like thoughts don't know the future. How would that even be? But the fact of the matter is, we are feeling like we know. When that scenario pops up of like, oh no, everything's about to fall apart, we feel that as if it's truth. And we really don't, very little, and this is not our fault. It's just we're so conditioned to just take it all at face value. We don't really look and see that was an imaginary thought. Like that's imagination right there. We kind of treat it as if it's really what's likely to happen. And then we're in that, in such an emotional way. And so that's where I would start, is this kind of saying, is it really uncertainty that's the issue? Or is it apparent certainty from, believing all this stuff that the mind is tossing out?
Oh, I like that. It's a great place to start. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, because this for me, this idea, our brain is so sure that it's just so sure all the time, isn't it? It thinks it's got
Mhm.
everything worked out, and that having a plan, and when things change, it feels like it's the brain, the sweet little brain has, um, it felt sort of in control, didn't it? Doesn't it? When this is how I say it, like it feels kind of in control when, um, uh, previously, and then things change, and it's like it's the calculations it's been making need to kind of
Yeah.
reroute themselves, and there's kind of panic, and the mind goes into this sort of period of, kind of busyness, I think, more busyness, isn't it, as it's trying to recalculate. Would you,
Yeah.
how would you?
Yeah. More busyness. And because we're in general kind of identified with all of that, we believe it. We've been told to believe it. It speaks in first person. So we actually think it's us most of the time. Like it's not only that we believe it, it's that we are literally identified with it as if it's us thinking all this stuff. Yeah, it's like trying to recalibrate and figure out and predict. And then we bear the brunt of that. Like emotionally, it's exhausting. I mean, this is kind of some of the things people say of like how it feels. So, yeah, it's hard. It's hard when we're really identified with it and it's trying to figure out what's happening.
What would be your first step if someone is feeling really identified with their, how would you sort of ease them into, because there's that's the first step really, isn't it? Just realizing that there is a little
Yeah.
bit of space between us and our mind and our thoughts. Um, how would you speak to that? Like if you're just starting out, and I mean, just, at some point for all of us, I mean, we all think we are our mind. And then there's some point when we're like, oh, no, there is a little bit of space, and I'm not everything it says. And I can kind of watch it a little bit, not do everything it says. But
Yeah.
there's a moment, isn't it, when then you kind of realize that. Do you have any thoughts, or for people that are at that point where it's still kind of a new idea, like they might think, how would I
Yeah.
see, how do I see that bit of me?
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's a fun place to be. Like, I just be really curious. I mean, the reason, well, one of the many reasons maybe that we kind of just take this all at face value. I mean, there's many reasons because the whole world also is, and we're kind of just conditioned to, but it's almost like if you like a magician can pull off a magic trick because they're really good at sending your attention somewhere else so that you don't see what's really going on.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what thought has done. Thought has again spoken in first person as if it's you thinking this stuff. It's shown you a biased view of like only what kind of lines up. It's very easy to kind of very quick to dismiss or forget things that are contradictory or like explain them away. So again, if you're new to this might all sound very abstract, but I would say to start off, just turn and look and be so curious. Just have a little bit of time of just watching, like, wow, what's the next thought going to be? Oh, there's a thought. Oh, okay, it was that one. Now, what's the next thought going to be? This doesn't have to be a big, huge practice. It's not some, new meditation class you have to take. It's just our attention is out here all the time. All it is a simple turning back and being like, what's really going on here? Again, with nothing really on it. You don't need to get anywhere from this. If it's early days, that's the best time because you're just curious, like what's even happening.
Yeah. And then I think another place, uh, I guess from there, of course, sometimes it's easy, isn't it, to beat ourselves up for what we're thinking. And we might think, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but certainly some of the short thoughts I think are kind of, they seem kind of shocking. And you're like, why would I be thinking that? And there
Yeah.
can be a period of, judging. It's so normal, isn't it? Of course, that's what the brain does, judging our thoughts. And one of the things I love about your work is that you've got such a wonderful way of showing people that it's like you say, and just a thought. You say, I'm going to say this often. It's what the mind does. And so, like having that curiosity you're talking about, and also kind of this compassion. I also liked, I don't know if you want to share, but you share the story of your dog Jelly when she was a little puppy, and who's, I don't know if you want to take over the story, but where she was jumping around, and she's just doing what a little puppy would do. I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
encourage
Yeah.
that.
I mean, so it's like getting mad at her. Like, oh my gosh, this dog is like, playing with that toy again. It's chewing on, this piece of paper I left on the floor again. And not that that might not arise. We probably do talk like that. But it doesn't take much in a case like that. You have an adorable little puppy, you take a little step back, and it's like, well, of course she is. Of course. Like she has teeth coming in. She's a puppy. This is what they do. This is just what they do. But if we were really angry about it and it was like everything she was doing is wrong, I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of how we are here because it doesn't look like it's just this innocent little puppy. It looks like I'm thinking this, I'm doing that, I'm feeling this way. And that's another great place without a lot of pressure to just put a little bit of curiosity. Like, are you thinking that? What does that mean? If you think that if it feels like you're the thinker of this, which it does for most people until we look, if it feels like I'm the thinker, what is that? Is that saying that you are putting that thought there, or you're choosing it, or you're somehow making it happen? And if it feels like that's the case, just look a step further. Like, how? How do you do that? Like
Mm.
we could say right now, like, okay, everyone listening to this, think of a person you know. Okay, one just came to mind for me. Probably everyone has one. How did you do that? Did you choose that person? And if it feels like you chose that person to pop into your head, how? Now, as we say that, it's funny because minds are so good at trying to keep that ownership. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, it's the last person I texted, or, there'll be theories. But
Mhm.
still, if we really look at that, okay, so what? So it's the last person you texted. How did you have that name or face or whatever showed up for you show up in your head right now? How did you actually do that as you were listening to this conversation? And it doesn't take much to really look and see, okay, maybe I don't know. We don't have to even say I'm not doing it, but I don't know. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how I did it. And that all starts to, starts to help us see this a little bit differently.
It's so key, isn't it? Because when we make them personal, when we see them as, similar to a young child, or like we might see this innocent little puppy or an old dog or whatever, like it's easy to see that the mind's just doing its thing. And I think it takes pressure off instantly, which is for me when looking at like how to manage periods where it's particularly challenging mentally, like where we're feeling overwhelmed, or it just feels more challenging. We're facing something new, or things are a little bit topsy-turvy for us. Just having that sense of it's okay. It's really okay how whatever's showing up right now. Like if we can just take that off the table and not add to what's happening, the
Yeah.
worry that we're abnormal, that we're doing this wrong, that all the stuff coming into our mind, like you add that on and now you've got another layer. So we can just take that layer down, and exactly like you say, just it's the brain, we're not even doing it right. Where the thoughts come to us from who knows where. We don't
Yeah.
have to take responsibility for them. We can be curious, like you say, and notice them, but we don't have to, believe them, and we don't have to feel responsible for them. And there's a gentleness, as part of what I really love about everything you do. There's this gentleness. Like first of all, it's okay. You're right. This is
Yeah.
normal. This is
Yeah.
normal, and it might be unpleasant. Like okay doesn't mean it's not, that it's
Right.
really pleasant all the time. Um, but it's normal, so we can scribble off the "there's something wrong with me" concern.
Yeah, the unpleasantness, I mean, really is what gets most of us to be curious and look. Because if it's just pleasant and easy all the time, then what motivation is there to look and see what's really going on? So, I mean, in a way, that's really kind of a gift. And for most, it doesn't have to be that way, but it usually is. It's the most common way is that we suffer enough and we say something's not right here. Like there has to be some other way to see things or whatever, and then that kind of turns us back, which is good.
It's wonderful. And I think your description of this, and again, just a thought with the golden Buddha, I'd never heard that story before. And I really liked how you put it. Maybe you could speak to this a little bit or share that story because, again, like you say, we don't have to come at insights. We don't have to experience turmoil. It's not the only way we can have shifts, but if we're in it, it can be a useful way to help kind of break some of those beliefs that have actually been causing us problems all along. But
Yeah.
now, because of what's happening, it's, now we're really feeling them. And then as we start to get a bit curious and and sort of find our way through them, it actually is giving us a gift that will help us when life goes back to quote normal, or when there's more, so that we can kind of
Yeah.
carry them through us. But that golden bullet Buddha story it was lovely.
Yeah. I barely remember.
Can I? Oh, really? Because I
Yeah.
wondered about that, and I thought, okay, so
Yeah.
I'll remind you the details. So there was a just,
I know the Buddha didn't look gold and that he was really made of gold.
it was,
And they
yeah.
thought
So
it was junk, but
13th century Bangkok time. There's this big gold Buddha, and and then there was an invasion, so they
oh, they
covered up the
covered
Buddha,
it.
yeah,
Yes.
with
Yeah.
dirt and sand and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and for like hundreds of years, nobody, that was so well hidden, no one discovered it, and then it was at the 1960s. It was, as you
Yeah.
love this story, it was dropped
Yeah.
and cracked. And can I read what you wrote?
Yeah.
Because it's okay.
Sorry. That book's a lot more familiar to you than me. I'm sorry.
I know. Well, it came out a few years ago. So yes, I imagine. But I was reading it in preparation for this interview. So it's super fresh with me. Um, and then one day you get dropped and you go through a breakup or a breakdown, um, or whatever it is. And you listed a few other things, and you're unable to pick yourself up and go back to how things were, which is excellent news. You're dropped so hard, a crack is formed, and you're forced to look beyond the appearance of things. You catch a glimpse of what's there beyond the facade. And that you go on to say that, of course, we don't need to be dropped to see these. We can be curious, we can discover insights, and we can have shifts, of course, during periods when we're not going through dropping
Yeah.
phases. But I just thought it was lovely because and even if, and when we're in that period of feeling more, where it's more tumultuous, I don't think we need to worry too much. But for me, there's about this, what we're talking about here. But there is a little gift. There is a gift for all of us. What is that Khalil Gibran quote about pain is the breaking of the shell of my understanding? Do you know that quote? I thought
Yeah,
about
it's
that for
familiar.
years. The same kind of thing. It's once that understanding breaks, which is what we're talking about, some simple shifts in understanding, and with that comes a greater ease, just naturally, like it kind of can happen.
Yeah. Well, it really ties in with uncertainty too, because again, the only reason like that feels like a struggle in uncertainty is because we think we know how things should go, which is such a joke. It's so hilarious if you think about it. Like uncertainty would not be a problem again if we didn't have an agenda, if we didn't think this is how it's supposed to be, as if thought here knows how the world is supposed to operate. Without that, uncertainty would be like children, where uncertainty is amazing. It's what makes everything fun. I mean, uncertainty is a great thing if you're a little child, or if you're, watching a great movie or reading a great book and you haven't gotten to the end yet. Like we love that experience of uncertainty. It's just when the adult mind starts filling in blanks and saying, no, this is what was supposed to happen. So when those kind of drops, when we get cracked or whatever, um, it's awesome because what's actually getting cracked is our idea of how we thought things should be. And it was never, ever, ever stable to begin with. It was always going to get cracked. And if not that one, a friend of its, when its cousin, if your job wasn't going to fall apart at some point, your health would, or something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just literally the nature of things. So awesome when that happens in a way.
Yeah, and that sense, because it's that sense of control, isn't it? That yeah, our mind, like you say, our mind just, it thinks it's in control, which is like, it's so silly. Like we
Yeah.
can't control everything that's happening, but our
Yeah.
mind really thinks it is, and it's kind of working hard all the time. So busy, so helpful. It's so for me, it was lovely to think of the brain I really try and think of it in a generous, warm way because it's so helpful, right? Like it's so mean to us sometimes. It's so hard on us and judging us and telling us we're not doing this right or wrong, but it's really trying. Like it's really that more than it's got our back. It's really trying to help. And it's the sense that it's actually doing too much. It's it's well-meaning, but it's we it's just sort of overdoing a little bit, which is where some of that pain comes in, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with it, which is why we don't need to listen to everything it says because it kind of gets out of its depth, um,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
We could, yeah,
We
um,
kind of are like just taught, I think, to give it so much attention. I think that's a lot of the, like, we give it so much respect and attention, and we think this because we're told this, like it's solving problems. It's what gets us through life.
yeah,
And that's a cool thing to kind of consider too. Like, is it really? Is it really?
yeah, yeah.
Do we need it to the extent that, like, especially when it's just constantly talking, and planning and like, do we really need that?
Yeah, I'd love to go there. I don't know if we like, you know, talking about other, um, I don't know if we, what just in this beginning phase before we head off into maybe what else we could use if we're not using our mind so much. Um, I think we've kind of covered it, but your point about overwhelm, your in that podcast, as I was hearing, and if you'd like to, you know, share that this idea of being, it's not like not resisting the overwhelm and
Yeah.
being in it, that it was the pain of resisting.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's kind of what we're just saying about how thought thinks it knows what's supposed to happen. Down to, like, I mean, in big ways and in very subtle, small ways. So when there's a feeling that it's very circular, that thought is saying, oh, this is too much, it knows what enough is, apparently, because it's the one deeming this sensation too much. So it knows the appropriate amount and what is supposed to be felt right now. And this is wrong, obviously. And in just in that, there's just this sense of this pushing, this like bracing ourselves, this trying to hold ourselves away from it. Um, yeah, and that's what hurts. It hurts so much. And it solidifies this sense of a me that can't handle a lot of stuff and that needs things to be a certain way, which is all thought created. That me does not exist in life. If you look around in the world, you don't see a me who is too fragile to handle things and can only handle this and that. It's only in thought. That me is only found in imagination, and it's found in imagination a lot, and we get very used to it, so it feels very real, but it isn't. But yeah, that sense of bracing and protecting and controlling and holding things apart. What if we just don't do that? Like, what if we just let, like, whatever? It's not even let. That's saying too much. It's just what's here is here, and we can just be it. We don't need to hold ourselves apart from it. And just like all of nature that does that, it's like it just overwhelms us, but it's always moving. Everything's always changing and moving. So it's a beautiful thing to be overwhelmed by that and then spit out the other side. And it's like it just keeps on going.
Love that way of saying things, and because of course our mind, when we're experiencing the busyness of the mind panicking that things are not what it
Yeah.
expected, it feels rigid, it feels stuck, like if it feels like the mind's like, I can't see my way. How am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And it feels like it's not going to shift. But like you say, and maybe that's another point, like just understanding that that think that life moves, and
Mhm.
no matter how solid this place feels, it's it is, like the old metaphor of the clouds, it is shifting.
It's so
And
huge because it doesn't, and the reason it doesn't feel that it feels so solid is it's like that's kind of what the mind does is it just kind of takes a snapshot. It's like, here you go, here's your picture, here's your picture. It's doing that all the time, and it gives it that sense of, yeah, solidity. But when that isn't happening, even when that is happening, beyond all that, it's like, yes, everything is constantly moving. constantly in flux. And so if we can feel into that, like if you can feel how this moment is totally unknowable, like we could put words around it. Amy and Lisa are having a conversation. Fine. That's some abstract label concept somewhere. That's not really what's happening here. There's a lot, or it's not all that's happening here. Like there's a ton happening here, right? That we can't nail down, we can't define, we don't even understand it. And that's like always the case. When you kind of can feel into that a little bit, it kind of puts the other side into a different light of like, why is my mind really mad that life got it wrong? Like this thing should have been different. My finances should, that number on my bank account should be not that number. That's the wrong number. Meanwhile, like this is just so unknown and constantly moving. So it's a real contrast, yeah, of like the mind, like, no, you got it wrong. And life being like, what the heck? I didn't get anything right or wrong. Like it's a process. It's not even, it's not still.
Yeah. 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 Beautiful. All right. Did you have, I mean, we can go on keeping chatting, but did you have another point that you wanted to, like another alley you wanted to explore with us?
Well, I thought about a few things just with regard to uncertainty. We might have touched on some.
Okay.
And you can see what feels like it would fit or not. We could talk about the future and what that is, and
Mhm.
that could be good because that's what uncertainty is all about mostly. But kind of on the flip side of that too, like where we find peace. You kind of said this in your opening, like where do we find peace when it looks like everything's super uncertain? Where do we go? Because we don't want to just make up a nicer story that's also imagination. We don't want to try to convince ourselves that everything that looks to be falling apart is really not that bad, because that's just another nice story. Like, so what's real? I don't know.
That sounds great. Should we start with
Okay.
the future and then head that way?
Sure.
Because then we're kind of like the future's kind of part of that problem, isn't it? The way we see the future. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So, whenever I say this stuff, it seems like it's gonna seem really like out there, but it's very like practical. It's in the camp, like everything we're talking about is kind of in the camp of it's really not that strange or woo-woo. We just never look. We
Yeah.
just take so much, for granted. It's like we grow up being told there's a Santa Claus. We all believe in Santa Claus. That's not weird at all. And and then you get to a certain age and you're like looking at your kids like, so do you still believe there's a person that circles the entire globe in one night? And it takes a bit. And it's like, of course they do. They were told that from the time, if they were, from the time they were little, right? And so, but once you look, it's like, oh, duh, of course that's not, and then once you see that it's not, it's so obviously not. So anyway, that's how I feel like a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is. Um, and time is a big one of those, like the past and the future,
Yeah.
especially the future when it comes to uncertainty, because that's what the uncertainty is about. The uncertainty is not about right this minute, ever. And we can look and see, like, look right now. Is there ever really a problem right this instant? If you really look closely and kind of check in on this and keep an eye on it, what you'll find is there isn't. And as soon as something starts to form that feels like a problem, there's a story in mind and an image, a memory, something, a narration, something starting in thought that's placing it into the future. What if X happens later, right? Or even what if, say, I feel sick right now? What if this feeling lasts, which is the future? What if this feeling doesn't go away, which is again the future? What if things don't get better? Like, what if things get worse? There's always this sense of a future. And again, I know it sounds very cliche, but where is that future? Like, does it really even exist? Because if we're gonna worry about it all the time, it might be good to know what the heck is it a real thing we're even worried about, or is it a Santa Claus basically that we're worried about? And you look and see the future can only ever be thought up. It exists in thought. And it really feels real because we've just been attending to it for so long. It's images, it's stories, it's, fragments of memories put into some other future time. There's a whole creation that happens in the mind. It doesn't happen in this room. It doesn't happen in your room. It doesn't happen in the body. It doesn't happen in the smells or in the seeing or in the hearing. It only happens in the thinking. And it's big. It feels very real. And that's what all this worry and all this fear of uncertainty is really about.
Yeah, I love how you describe that. And I love that you're not telling me to be um to really you're not giving I feel like some you're not telling me to be or telling us to be mindful and make sure we notice or be present. Like I feel like this is different. This is just a gentle, curious, like just look, just take a little peek at now.
Mhm.
um it's not about like noticing everything around you. It's just like just a gentle little peek at now. And because you're right, we don't do that very often, do we? Our mind, which is so loud, often, not always, but often very loud and very chatty, and really trying to help us and really trying to keep us safe and help us do the best thing as it sees from based on all of its, all of our everything that's happened in our past and what it sees around us. And um, it's not, it doesn't, our mind doesn't say, oh, it's actually, itself doesn't tend to sort of notice that, like you say, actually right now is often a lot more okay than it realizes. It's got with all that huge stories and the
Yeah.
lot of chatter.
Yeah. And it's tough to see sometimes because I know this is how it looked for me for a long time. It's like, yeah, I kind of know the future's not real, obvious. I mean, everyone kind of, you can get it
Yeah.
intellectually, right? But still feels so real. So even if I can look and see it's all images and mind and imagination, and right here, there's no problem, there would be like a knot in my stomach or like some anxiety happening or something because somewhere back here, it's like, okay, maybe right now I'm okay, but what's going to happen in a minute? It's persistent, and in a minute is a future. Like that in a minute only exists in thought. So, I think it's really important to be really gentle about this and just lean into it with curiosity because, like, I wish I had heard it more that way. I think I probably my own interpretation was like, let's do this, let's figure it out, and it's like, yeah, like I could see it intellectually, but it still feels real. So it's a weird exploration. It really is kind of just looking over and over again into like what's really going on and how is reality being kind of created on the spot, including time, which is created in the mind.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that gentleness, like man, if we could, yeah, it's so key through all of this. Um, if Yeah, because it's that intellectual understanding comes first. And at first it's confusion, honestly, isn't it? Often there's like a what?
Mhm.
Sometimes, not always. And then maybe we start to understand some new ideas that maybe are helpful during various times. We can see them. We're like, okay, that makes sense. Um, but not always. And uh, I remember when I was younger having a challenging time, and it was with forgiveness. This issue came up for me with forgiveness with around friends and things that weren't doing what I thought they should be doing. And it started to have this intellectual understanding. It was like my brain could see, like, oh, so it's not all about me. And I could totally see how there wasn't even anything to forgive. It was all good.
Yeah.
But when I came up, met them out, I wasn't, it was totally different. I was a complete wreck and I was crying and upset, like, so it took a while, it took years actually for it to catch up. But I think I now have much more compassion for slowness of this. It's okay if these shift, they take time. I really appreciate being on the journey, or I don't know if a journey is the right word. I really, it's okay for these things to happen in little steps. If maybe they happen in bigger steps, but it's however it is. is completely fine. And it's like you say, it's just the story that we're telling us about we should be doing this faster or generally slower that can maybe cause added uh, worry as we're starting to see new ideas. But just yeah, it's however, like you say, it's just stories, and however it is wherever we're at is really okay. There's nothing. The only we're not. It's um yeah, we're human beings. We have this brain. It takes a while for it to kind of things to kind of new ideas sometimes not to kind of actually become part of us. So we're not actually having to think them. Now, my friends, I absolutely feel like there's nothing to forgive. I completely know. But it took me some years to get there, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
I think with this kind of exploration of like how thought works, what's real, what's imagination, that type of thing, um, often it will kind of resonate on a level with someone, but that doesn't mean anything. Like I mean, it does. It's good. Like the
Mm,
resonating is,
yeah.
it's something. It's keeping us kind of attached or like interested and intrigued and all of that. But what I mean by that is, like you could also get really frustrated. I think sometimes people listen to this and they're like, I'm listening and these women are saying there's no such thing as time and there's nothing to forgive. Like they're insane. And like, and that's interesting. If you get really like energized around this, there might be something in there to be curious about. And again, you don't have to do anything with that. Just like you're saying, that's cracks forming. That's the
Mm.
Buddha getting dropped in a sense. And then things are going to start unraveling from there. So whether you're mad at us or it's just like I'm so confused or like, oh, I get this totally intellectually, so why don't I feel better? That was me for a long time. I
Mm.
totally get it, so why is it not like embodied perfectly? Again, like it's a process that we're not managing, and those are kind of stops along the way.
One thing that helped me, I think, was understanding that I was already, it was all, and I've seen you wrote about this too, but that sense of like, I'm actually already completely whole and it's just for the chatter in my mind that I can't
Yeah.
feel it. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
even almost all of the time. So for me, that was a big thing that helped me ease into allowing the space for me to kind of you know, see new things in life that would make life more peaceful and easy. It's like, okay, I know that within me, and maybe you can help ground this so this doesn't sound too okay either, but within me, I already have everything. I'm all of peace and love and everything. I feel completely self-assured and all that. That's already within me. That's me. And it's just this stuff in my mind that stops me from hearing that. This is much louder than you should have done this, or this doesn't look right, or all of that kind of thing. And that so for me it took the pressure off. When I was younger, I really thought that I had somewhere to go to become calmer and become like you. I was very driven to find calm. I could tell that there wasn't enough calmness in me.
Right.
There was, of course, but it didn't feel like it. So I was thought it was there was lots of doing to be done. And then
Mhm.
once I understood that it was there, so now I don't have to worry about that even. It's like it's there and it's okay if most of the time or any of the time I don't feel it. Like I know it's there
Yeah.
and now we got this thing happening and there are ways you can start to feel this more, which maybe will,
Yeah.
get
Well, I
down there
think,
in a minute.
I
But
mean,
for now,
that's so huge. I think what you're saying, it was huge for me too. So big. It's like people hear it in different ways, like that you're not broken because many people feel broken. And when you feel broken, you have a long way to go to fix yourself,
yeah.
which doesn't sound all that different, but it's totally different from, no, I am health by nature. Like, and there is no problem. And there's a bunch of thinking talking about problems. Totally, just for everything. You said it perfectly. Like, it just takes the pressure off.
Mm.
It allows us to just take attention away from the thinking because if it looks like we have to fix something, we're going to attend to thinking because that's the fix it. That's the fixer is all the thinking. If you know the health and the peace is here right now, but for the thinking, you naturally get to just pay a little less attention to that. So that's huge. So big. Yeah.
Yeah. So big. Yeah. All right. I love it. So I feel. And one
Yeah.
thing I was got in reading this book, I a beautiful ways of describing and things, and your other books as well. Um, and I think that it's so easy to forget. Like, it's such a nice reminder for me to read, even to read this. I feel calmer after reading this, after for the
Mm.
last couple of days, just from being reminded of this stuff, because my mind gets caught up um, in life and my, troubles, or whatever my brain is thinking needs to be different.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy. Our brain is so good at and so insistent, really, at getting our intention to fix things. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was really lovely. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I like how you were talking about how the brain, and as you're talking about it just being like such a good little helper and just so nice, but just like goes a little too far.
Yeah,
As you're saying that, and I can picture some of your illustrations of the brain with the arms and legs. Like it's so innocent, you know? Um, what was I gonna say about that? Yeah, but just like oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. I don't know. Maybe it'll come back. Sorry. Hopefully you can edit this part out.
yeah,
I had something good along those lines, but I don't know. Maybe we'll keep talking. Maybe it'll
yeah,
come back.
yeah. Uh, so what do I? So moving forward, should we? Feel like we're kind of getting into the. Oh, we're definitely okay. Let's move into the um that next point you were going to talk about, because this is kind of like,
Yeah.
and I think where we're heading is that this, like, we kind of act as if we're, we're just our brain, and our brain like wants to do it all, needs to fix it all. And for me, a huge shift was understanding that my brain is not even capable of doing it all, and that there's this other part of me. And Ken, I'm going to throw it over to you, because you have a lovely way of describing how people can right now find a little more peace. What was that? Yeah.
Like beyond all that,
Yeah. What
that's
was the other? Where
doing.
was that? Yeah. You had, maybe I've just kind of, or maybe forget that little introduction to this next point. Maybe you run
No,
with it.
yeah, like kind of where, okay. I mean, we're all on the same track here. It's all kind of related. So it
Yeah.
looks like that brain is at a certain point, it looks like we need our mind to be happy, let's say, or to be peaceful. Like, and even though we kind of maybe know that we don't, because we hear that people in the world meditate, and if they're not thinking, like that's supposed to be peaceful, like we kind of get that that's not really how it is. But when the mind is really active and it's constantly tossing out solutions, and we're just told to sort of listen to them and follow them, of course, there's just a lot of attention there, as if that's kind of where the peace is going to be. So when everything kind of goes up in smoke and we're like, well, what's going on with life and my finances and my health and the world and all of that, and there's all this uncertainty, the mind's gonna, as we've said, is gonna jump in and give a lot of stuff. But as we've all seen, everyone has seen this in their own life many times over in different ways. Like, there isn't really a mental solution to that stuff. It doesn't mean there's not stuff to do. You'll do things in the world, there's things that will happen, um, but like the thinking about it over and over, and if you don't see this, just hold this as what if. Like, what if the thinking about it isn't really solving anything? Because we do probably have the experience, all of us, of the thinking about it just being this huge carousel that's just round and round and round, and we kind of know there's no really, you have to kind of jump off of that. There's no like solution on it. So when somebody's saying like, well, where do I find peace and comfort? Because it really looks like everything's up in the air and I know nothing. We aren't going to find it by staying on the carousel and finding a nicer story, because that might work for a second and then that doesn't make sense anymore. Like that's not it. It's going to come from jumping off that carousel altogether. And again, coming back down to like reality. And by reality, really, I mean, kind of coming to the senses, like what's here. And I know this can sound kind of like something that people have heard before in mindfulness, but just see if you can hear it fresh. Like, what's actually real? If we see that this might happen, oh, that's a thought. because there's no might happen here in real life. That's a projection. That's a thought. And it also said might. It said could. There's nothing is guaranteed in that. So that is not where the peace is going to be. There's no stability in that. And it's not even real. It's only an imagination. Like, what is real? There's hearing. There's literally, like, right now, if we just pay attention, open to sounds, there's so many sounds here. We could lose ourselves in sound, be overwhelmed by sound. There's not a problem in the world, and the sound does not need certainty. It doesn't care. It doesn't need anything. We could do the same in color and shape in the visual field. We could go in the body. That's my favorite one. You could just let your attention be in the body. And even if there's butterflies, what we call butterflies, that's an interpretation, but there's burning, there's movement, fine, fine. Like, go in the middle of those sensations. Do they need anything? Do they need certainty? Do they need to know what's going to happen when there's a new president or when you go to the doctor next? I don't need any of that. It's alive and it's immediate and it's the realest thing there is. And this is the weird thing is we're so used to listening to thought, we think that's neglectful, it's irresponsible, it's denying. It's the complete opposite because it is what is actually real. Our imagination telling us what might happen in the future, that's kind of denial. And I don't say that with any judgment, but if anything, like, that is not real. That is literally an imagination. So if there's something that's irresponsible here, it would probably be that. It would not be coming into what's actually here. And coming into what's actually here is like, I don't want to make it too flowery or say too much about it, but it's like there is just a knowing, there's a sense, if I'm sitting here in the body and all of a sudden I have to go to the bathroom, feet will walk me to the bathroom. I don't need to make decisions. I don't need to know the future. So, and it's not just going to the bathroom. You will make the phone call, you will have the conversation, you will do the thing because that's already happening naturally, pretty much on its own anyway. We just think we're doing it. So anyway, like, when we're looking for peace, it's like so close. We can't even see it. It's so close. But to kind of play with coming into reality, and again, that's helpful or easier when we can see what's not reality, which is the future, scenarios that aren't real, that kind of thing.
I love that. I love that. Yes, absolutely. And that's that. We're kind of giving the mind I don't know, it sort of feels like it's like there's nothing for the mind, it doesn't have to do anything. Like, we're just sitting there and we're just being. And if the mind wants to yell at us about whatever, it's okay. It can yell at us.
Yeah.
And it might stop yelling after a while, or it might not. It's okay. It's we don't have to, like with the little puppy, like, we don't have to, you know, or the little child or whatever, how we think of that mind. We don't have to, we can just sit here and we've got this thing with us and it's doing whatever it's doing.
Yeah.
It's okay. One practical, well, there's one thing I thought, well, for me, this busyness, it's very easy, of course, when our mind is upset about this change or the situation we find ourselves in. I think it naturally gets very busy and can get quite frantic. And so just in gentle ways, knowing that that's really normal for the brain to do. And I think when that happens, you can kind of feel, can't you, when you're being busy out of kind of a running away, or it's not coming from a genuine, I mean, busyness is great, right? Of course, we love doing things, but just noticing if spaces just come up in your day and whether you're sort of crowding in on them, out of your brain, driving you frantically forward.
Yeah.
And providing us opportunities, like you say, like, no matter how busy we are, there are spaces in everyone's day. They don't have to be long. We don't have to be doing this. I don't think you're saying you have to, like, add in hours of doing this, are you? It's just like it's like little, just when we notice it and not beating ourselves up for not, getting around to doing this, or forgetting, like, we get caught up for however long and then maybe we remember.
Yeah, and that's going to happen a ton because it's been reinforced over and over again to kind of listen to thought, be in imagination, plan for the future, think about the past. It's fine. Like you said, glad you brought that bit up because none of that is a problem. it's just, it's not a problem in itself, but the conversation, the content of it is where the problems live. So does that make sense? Like the process of it, that minds imagine and
Yeah.
project and predict and all of that, wonderful. But when we're really in the story of it, like, oh yeah, this is my life and this is likely and this is probably going to happen, like that's the only place problems exist. And then we just come into reality. And to your point, like I'm doing it as we're talking, like you don't have to even set time aside. It's almost like attention can just be a little bit more in the senses than in the abstractions. And it starts to just feel more and more peaceful and real. And yeah, it's something we practice and play with because it's against the norm for sure.
Yeah. And and ironically, like our mind wants thinks it's can figure all this out. It's like, okay, and now I've got to figure out, a new set of plans, and God, this man
Yeah.
is going to be really tricky. I've got to get onto them right away, and there's no time to stop. And the of course in the like you say, in the spaces and that well, that was my word, but in that sort of stopping, if we can just stop a little bit,
Hmm.
like that's where we really know things. I feel like it's the brain spins out about everything it doesn't know and all the plans it now and that often when you really kind of stop, you're like we just naturally can feel what we know, whether it's like you say, like, oh, now I need to go to the toilet, maybe, and there's a things just come up. We're like, oh, I know that I know, right? Maybe whatever's happening, and you have a sense of I need to cook dinner. Like that's I know right now that coming from a feeling of this is the thing to do, and all these little steps that don't, and then maybe another thought another time is to I'm going to ring someone and then whatever happens, or I'm going to explore this avenue, but it's coming from a out of that more quietness. Like I say, it doesn't have to be. We don't have to be, you know, adding. We don't need to make this too big a deal, but just in those little moments where we just give ourselves a little break. That's where the direction. That's where kind of like we can kind of catch. We're already we're already living. We're not going to catch life, but we we can kind of move through it and trust that we'll go. And we've got this kind of wisdom, this deep wisdom within us that's here and that our mind doesn't forgets about, or sometimes doesn't mind, didn't know about it for many decades. It
Yeah.
was a complete
Yeah.
surprise to discover that there was something else within me that might have insights and useful things to say that were in many together, both with my mind, of course, is our mind. The mind is amazing, and then but so is this other bit, this gentle bit of us that feels calm and self-assured and has some really great ideas about what we should do.
Yeah. I think sometimes the mind thinks that we're going to know it like in like the way that the mind would know it, like in some big flash, like I know it's time to make dinner. And it's not like that necessarily. It might be, but
Yeah.
most of the time it's probably not. Most of the time it's probably like you find yourself making dinner,
Yeah.
And so I just think that's funny because it's easy for us to be like, well, I don't have certainty about what the next step is, but that's because the mind isn't having a party about it and being like, I know what to do. It's not like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you're saying, it's
It,
just, it happens.
and the mind, it's the stories of the mind. It's like this whole thing. And then if I make dinner, the mind would be like, okay, you should make dinner. And then if you make dinner after that, you can blah blah blah, and then
Right.
this will happen. And as compared with just a sense of, you know, you just like you say, you just find yourself moving towards the kitchen. You're like, I have no idea what to do, but
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like you're just kind of drawn to the kitchen and you make dinner. I'm using this as an example, but it's
Yeah.
very different. Those two, the sort of loud, you need to do this because blah 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 will happen, and then this is the gentle, I like how you describe it, that just gentle, just moving. How did you describe it? I love that. There's kind of we're kind of moving with
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of
uh,
moved, It's like life
move.
just sort of
Yeah,
moves you forward.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Trusting that. I love that. All right. Any last thoughts? Oh.
Ah, no, I think this has been such a great conversation. We covered a lot of ground. Yeah, I hope it's good. And I hope that people listening can just, at least, at the very least, like see uncertainty a little differently. Like, instead of like, oh, I need to know and I don't, it's uncomfortable to not know. It's almost flipping that a little bit and seeing like, no one ever knows, but the mind thinks we need to know. And that's a good thing to be onto because we just don't.
Yeah,
We don't
absolutely.
and we can't. And there's actually no peace or safety or security in knowing. That's kind of what the mind would have us believe, but that keeps it energized and keeps it getting a lot of attention. But there's peace and safety and security here before all of that. It's here already.
I love that. And however much of, you said this before, this conversation people take, it's okay. Like it's okay if a lot of it doesn't make sense. It's
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Um, Now I kind of want to throw it back to you for the last word. That was so lovely what you said. Um,
And
yeah,
maybe just like how we
there you go.
started, by saying that it's not uncertainty that's scary. It's, uncertainty is not scary. It's when the mind makes up stories and those feel certain. Like that's what impacts us. That's what's uncomfortable and what's scary is our mind stories about how it's going to be that look really real and they do look and feel very, very real. But that's where we get to kind of look and see, oh, is this here in seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, or is it a story and thought? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to talk with you, and I love this topic.
Yeah, great. Brilliant.